All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining. So, today we're going to cover week 4 of Money Matters. And so, let's jump right into it. So, just by way of review, this course is the Money Matters course that is supposed to be a biblical perspective. It's not supposed to be, it is the biblical perspective about money. And we won't take too much time today. If you've been a part of this, if you haven't, you should go back and try to get a hold of the recordings from the first 3 sessions. But we are currently covering the practical personal finance portion of this series. And as this outline shows, we started off about the biblical perspective. What does the Bible have to say about money, managing your money? We focused a lot on the parable of talents. And then in the past couple weeks, what we've been focusing heavily on is 2 things: A, debt, and what the Bible has to say out of debt, and offering some practical perspective on how to eliminate and reduce and minimize debt in your life. And then in our last session, I believe 2 weeks ago now, we started talking about saving and investing and how really it's just the inverse of getting out of debt. Keep that momentum going and build your debt payments into savings and try to grow your wealth. And so today we're going to kind of cap off the personal finance portion about talking how we can reduce our overhead, how we can live with less, which ultimately will lead to more. It's just one of those dichotomies in life. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But before we do, I want to share a scripture and a quote that I think is just so profound and powerful and relevant to today's discussion. So, Proverbs chapter 21 and verse 20. The book of Proverbs just has some zingers here, and I love this one. It says in the New Living Translation, "The wise have wealth and luxury, but fools spend whatever they get." Ouch. If you're like me, this is a little bit of a judgment on your lifestyle in the past, in some cases, maybe even in the present. But it's so true. This is the world we live in. So many people live paycheck to paycheck. And the writers of this proverb is really speaking to that lifestyle to say that if you're spending whatever comes in, um, maybe that is not a wise lifestyle. That is probably a foolish lifestyle. There's this quote down here, and this is a little bit of ironic, the source of the quote, because it's by none other than Coco Chanel, and obviously the owner of one of the largest luxury brands. But look at what it says here. Chanel said, "Luxury must be comfortable, otherwise it is not luxury." Wow, when I read that, that was pretty profound to me because how many people, and perhaps even yourself, can think, throughout your past, the decisions you've made, the lifestyle choices that you've lived, where you indulged in luxury to the point where it was quite uncomfortable to do it. Uncomfortable because it was very expensive and you had to perhaps suffer a little bit to indulge that luxury item or that vacation or that whatever it might be. Perhaps it was a house, a neighborhood that you moved into, and you really wanted to have a certain status, whatever the reason is, but it hurt. You had to really sacrifice for it. Well, really, that's not luxury. If you're having to suffer, you're having to stress about paying for that monthly payment of your vehicle because you really felt like it would be luxurious, then is that really luxury? Hmm. Speaking from experience, I would say it is not. And then on the flip side, uh, you know, if you're not comfortable in the, and this is not for everybody, but for me, there have been times that my wife and I have indulged in fine dining way beyond our status level. I remember particularly this one restaurant early on in our relationship we went to in Wilmington, Delaware, where my wife grew up nearby, and it was so high class. It was so high end, and we're talking probably close to 30 years ago now, if not 30 years, and It was like $100 a plate kind of restaurant, which some of you are probably laughing at me, but 30 years ago, first of all, $100 is not what it was today. And for a single guy dating, my wife, it was a big deal. And I can tell you that we didn't feel comfortable there, to the point where we left there and, we were talking, and here, I'm paying for that meal probably on a credit card because I couldn't afford it. But I was trying to impress Christy. But we were talking in a car. I remember it so vividly. We didn't really enjoy it. And the reason why we enjoy it is not that the food wasn't good, not that the service wasn't good. It's not that the, decor wasn't beautiful and the waitress wasn't serving us well. No, it was because we weren't comfortable there. We felt out of place. And so was it really luxury? I thought that was really, really interesting to read that, because maybe not that profound on our day to day lives, but a lot of us allow quote unquote luxury into our lives, but it's not really comfortable. And so, is it really luxury at all? Which leads us to discuss kind of the theme of what we're talking about today. Living with less can lead to so much more in your life. I've learned this after some years, based on this one principle. And this is the key point to today's lesson that I want everybody to get a hold of. Reducing your overhead. It's not just about, Dan says you need to save money, so that's why we need to save. Yeah, I mean, it's good to save. But more importantly, the reason why is because of the statement underneath the subtitle here. A dollar saved is better than a dollar earned. We're going to talk about why, because you might be like, I don't know about that. As a matter of fact, there's a close friend of mine. I overheard her some years back, sort of criticizing somebody that I know, a mutual friend, for, let's just say, being very frugal, for making some decisions that were very, very frugal for his family. Meeting the needs of his family. It happened to be his wife. This individual, had made a purchase of this. I don't want to give too much detail, not to incriminate the innocent here, but he made a purchase that fully met the need, in this case for his wife, but it was very basic. And so this other mutual friend of mine, she was sort of criticizing for him, and he came back and said such a profound thing. He said, look, he in not this exact vernacular, but he said a dollar saved is better than a dollar earned. And I find that to be so, so true for a lot of reasons. And I want to dig into at least three today to share with you and hopefully motivate you why saving, why reducing your overhead can be such a powerful force in your personal finance. So before we do that, I'll just share, I spent about 26 years working in various businesses in my career, ranging from small businesses, startups, as a matter of fact. In a couple cases, I worked for startups, all the way to Fortune 50 companies like Raytheon Technologies and Johnson Controls International, which are, one of the 50 largest companies in the world. All that to say, the common theme in business, most qualified, competent business leaders understand that a focus on saving and fiduciary responsibility, reducing your spending, especially where it's not needed, is one of the most powerful allocation of resources you can have. So let me strip the fancy speak out of that. Spending time looking and finding ways to reduce how much you spend is one of the most powerful things you can do for your personal finance situation. It's vastly agreed. Now, there are some people who will disagree with that. They'll say, "Oh, just focus on making more money. Focus on making more money." I just watched an interview just today, actually, between two prominent. You would probably know them if you're somebody who pays attention to this kind of thing. But they're between two prominent finance influencers that are making their rounds online in this day in 2025. One of them is, multi-millionaire, quite wealthy, and the other one was, like borderline wealthy. But they're both financial literacy influencers. And the one is he shared he was worth like tens of millions of dollars. The other was worth, like, at least the way he insinuated, $1 million or so in net worth. And the discussion they were having was, the one that was worth less. He's like, wow, if I had $12 million. He started doing the math just like I would, and he started thinking, he's like, man, $12 million at this, basic return on my investments, I would be making $50,000 a month. He's like, I wouldn't even know how to spend that money, is the comment he made. He's like, I can't even imagine having $50,000 of passive income a month. He's like, I wouldn't even know how to spend it. And the other guy kind of sat back in his chair. He's like, yes, you would. He said, especially if you grow into that kind of lifestyle, he said, then it disappears just like $500 a month or $5,000 a month. And can I tell you, from a personal perspective, I found that to be true. We so easily adjust our lifestyle and our spending habits to match our income rather than really what we need. And if you want to get ahead, the trick is to increase the amount of money, the money that's coming in, into savings, and the ability to leverage that to invest and build and grow, like we talked about last week or last session. So we won't go into that and recap that all. But again, there is, hopefully by now you're convinced in the transformative power of having savings and the ability to invest and leverage that to build, hopefully at one point, fully passive income that can be generational. We won't go down that rabbit hole again. I want to move quickly today, but let's talk about this concept here. A dollar saved is better than a dollar earned. Well, first and foremost, the reason why that's a true statement is the tax factor. So let's just look at this from a practical perspective. A lot of people don't think about this because taxes, it's just something that's part of life and it's sort of in the back of our head. And so we're going to analyze a dollar here, but really this scales to pretty big numbers once you start analyzing your entire budget, how much you make. You have to pay attention to this. And this is just one example. So the statement here on this slide, it says, to actually keep $1 after taxes, so that's federal, state, local, your Social Security taxes, even your sales tax, if you're having to, consider that, you really need to earn $1.20 up to $1.30, depending on your pay scale, to actually keep the dollar. So again, let me just repeat that. So if we're talking about earning a dollar, in other words, you want to spend a dollar, really what you need to do is you need to earn $1.30. And I'll say, I've certainly been in situations myself where you're not set up in a tax advantaged way, I'll say. It may be closer to $1.40. You need to earn $1.40, close to $1.50, just so you can spend a dollar. That's what it takes to, if you want to spend a dollar, you need to earn like $1.50. So, the example there you can see, you earn $1.30. This is conservative. This probably applies to just about everybody. It's about average. So if you earn $1.30, you pay 23% in taxes. And so in the end, you have your dollar to spend. And then, you got to pay sales tax on that. So you're barely breaking even with the dollar. So earning is really the least efficient way to free up money in your budget. That's the key point here. I want you to get a hold of that because most of us, I know if you've been part of these series, I'm sure it's gone through your head that, I just got to make more money. And we've talked about it, and that's certainly a part of being successful financially is to, find additional ways to increase your earnings. I don't want to discount that, but you have to recognize the low hanging fruit on this vine is saving in the sense of reducing how much you spend. So one more thing. So, why is a dollar saved better than a dollar earned? Well, there's the effort factor. Earning more money requires additional time, additional effort, sometimes, most of the time, additional stress. Whereas saving money often involves a conscious choice, but it doesn't require any additional hours. We're going to talk about some practical ways you could do this, but in most cases, cutting out some extra expenses or Dare I say, even trading in that brand new car for a 5-year-old used car and cutting your payment in half or eliminating it altogether. Well, you might take a little ego hit that you're having to drive a little clunker around, or maybe not even a clunker, but not quite of a nice of a vehicle. But after a couple months, you're not going to think any different. It's going to be the same. And so, or perhaps just continuing to drive your current vehicle that's paid off instead of going buy that new vehicle that you're feeling drawn to. It's not going to make any difference if you do this for another 2 years and stay in an older paid off vehicle. That's just one example. And so there is an effort factor involved as well. And then finally, you have this timing impact, or what I call the immediate impact. So a dollar saved immediately increases your net availability of funds in order to reduce debt, or again, maybe to make an investment. If you save money, if you make a decision, as soon as you make that decision, that money is now yours. Whereas the flip side of the coin, if you're saying, no, I'm not going to reduce how much money I'm spending, I'm going to go find a way to make more money. Well, now you got to wait until you perform that labor. You got to wait till you get paid. And again, you have all the tax burdens and implications there. So there is a trade-off there on timing as well. That's quite important. And so what we want to emphasize here is, obviously, you have to, hopefully you understand that reducing your expenses, reducing how much money you spend, is a powerful, powerful force. And it all starts with your budget, as we talked about in previous sessions. I said this statement, and I'm going to drill it again. You cannot manage what you don't measure. And a personal budget is where you measure how you're spending your money and where it's going. Personal wealth, I wrote here, starts and ends with the budget. The reason why I say it starts is because we talked about this when you're talking about eliminating your debt. You got to have a budget. You have to understand how much money you're bringing in, how much you can allocate towards paying off your debt. And then it ends with a budget in a sense that, okay, now I'm debt free, but I'm going to have to track those expenses, make sure they don't get out of control and put me back in the situation that got me here. And also to see how I'm growing my savings. And so there in the bottom of the slide, it's important to emphasize and understand our needs versus our wants. And we can really spend a lot of time here, but for sake of time, we won't do that. But really, reducing the wants in your life is one of the easiest starting points on reducing your overall overhead. A lot of times, again, just going back to my secular career, I've managed large IT portfolios, and in many cases, I've managed tens and tens of million, multiple million, dozens of millions of dollars of information technology assets and investments. So contracts with vendors and software contracts and licenses and IT infrastructure, servers, et cetera, et cetera. All that to say, for me in my personal career, it's not my money. So typically, the bigger the budget I have to manage means more stress for me. And so what I've learned in my career is anytime I get a business stakeholder coming to me and saying, "Hey, I need this new, software. It's AI enabled. It's the latest thing. It's going to change the business." And and I ask how much it's going to cost. Oh, $1,300,000. And it's like, oh, okay. So what I'll immediately do is say, break that down for me. Let's see what's involved in that 1,300,000 investment. And more often than not, in my work, and I apply this in my personal life as well, once you start looking at that, you can find a bunch of wants and a few needs. And so that 1,300,000 investment, after I start asking difficult questions, well, is this line item something that you really need to be successful in this project? Or is this a little bolt on? Is this a little like, oh, well, maybe we don't need that many. Okay, let's reduce that. Oh, do you need this, do you need this many special $400 an hour consultants, or, would a offshore $50 an hour consultant work? Yeah, we could probably get by. Okay. And so next thing you know, 1.3 has become $600,000 because We're doing this exercise of analyzing needs and wants. That's something we all need to do in our lives and continue to do that regardless of where we are in life. Reducing wants is often the easiest starting point to success. We have to continually weigh this out in your life. You have to understand what are the things that are necessary for me to get to my goal. Now, not everybody not everybody thinks that way. And it might be helpful here to have some external help, financial coaching, perhaps a tax consultant or an accountant if you're at that level where you can afford it. But important thing is for you to analyze your spending and understand your needs versus wants. I'm not saying don't spend any money on your wants. You know, we all have them. We all have the areas that we spend. But as you're analyzing your spend in your budget, just make sure that you're being honest about what's needed and what's wanted. Because again, remember, if you want to reach your goal, the most powerful way to do that is to reduce your spending. And in most cases, that is the most important thing to do. So we'll close with this short today. Let's brainstorm some ideas together on how to reduce our spending. Really, there's two buckets here. So I like to start at the top bucket. And these are what we call fixed budget items. So, what are some ideas of how we can reduce our spend on fixed budget items? So, some examples here, and these are just some examples, but I want you as you're watching this to think about your personal situation and what could fit into this category. So, fixed budget items would be things like your housing costs. If you own a home, this is your mortgage. If you're renting, then this is your monthly rent. So what else? Loan payments. Perhaps you have student loans. Perhaps you have car loans. So a car payment, a car note, or whatever it might be, whatever kind of loan you have, these would be fixed budget items. Insurance would be one, life insurance, health insurance, liability insurance, car insurance. These are all fixed budget items. So you say, well, if they're fixed, Dan, how can I reduce those? Well, these are the tough ones. These are the ones that take very difficult conversations on your family and your situation to, in some cases, make some pretty drastic changes that can reduce your overall spend. But I want to pause here because if you're serious about reaching your goals, if you're serious about getting to where God has called you to be from a financial perspective, then you should tell yourself that this is on the table. So, housing. If you're living paycheck to paycheck and you truly feel like you're not, spending frivolously on vacations and all the other things, then maybe housing needs to be on the table. Maybe you should move into a smaller home, or maybe you should let that apartment downtown go and pick one out that's a little longer commute, that's cheaper, that may not be as nice, it hasn't been refreshed for the last 20 years. I'm a firm believer that there is the right housing if you're for your situation, if you're willing to make the sacrifice. I certainly have. You've heard me tell the story in the first and second session. My wife and I lived in a pretty rough area of town when we were going through our debt elimination process. And it was a one bedroom, 625 square foot apartment. And it's fine. It was fine. No shame in it. I'm happy to share. I drive by it every time I'm up in New Jersey, in Maple Shade, New Jersey, and remember the fond times we had there and the sacrifices we made. But that needs to be on the table. Car payments, we talked about this kind of ad nauseum, so I won't go through it too much, but one of the easiest ways to reduce your overhead, your fixed overhead, your car payment doesn't change, but you can change your car, or you can hold on to a car that's paid off. That's an easy one. Insurance, so on and so forth. Yeah, I think you get the point. If you have life insurance, I understand, that's probably important to you if you do have it. Maybe look for a different policy. Car insurance, shop around. Make sure you're reducing your fixed budget items as much as possible. These are tough, but it's doable. The ones in a green are no-brainers. So these are what's typically called your variable expenses: food, entertainment, and subscription services. And these days it seems like they're racking up. It seems like we're always signing up for a new additional subscription services. Those almost belong in fixed budget items, except for the fact that you can cancel them, so they belong here. This one's important because um, you can act very quickly, and in many cases, with very little adjustment to your lifestyle. Maybe you don't need that Netflix account. Maybe you don't need 600 megabit internet, fiber internet to your house. Maybe just scale that back a little bit. Maybe you don't need a subscription to Muscle Man magazine. You haven't been to the gym in 20 years. Come on, cancel that subscription, whatever it might be. Food. Again, shame to say it, but out of transparency, there's been times where I have spent thousands more per month than I should have on food. Food in our day and age is a trap. You can spend a lot of money on food. I'm preaching to the choir here. I know you know that, but between restaurants, eating out, um, and not even eating out anymore, we have grocery store options where you could just overspend at nauseum. So be frugal, be smart with your food choices. Shop around. Make sure that you're not overspending for food, and certainly entertainment. Again, I'm not saying you don't have to do any kind of entertainment, but there are options for free or for much lower cost that we can be fulfilled just the same, if not more. And then, again, think out of the box. I just put some examples here, but think out of the box. Your utilities, right? Um, there's ways that you can establish savings there. And certainly when you get to the point where you have a little bit of savings, maybe it makes sense to upgrade the HVAC in your house. If you truly have done the cost analysis and you plan on staying in that house, the investment makes sense. Um, put together a simple spreadsheet, figure out what the monthly savings will be. The installer, the contractor can help you do that in many cases, or I can, or anybody. There's several services that can do that. ChatGPT could do that for you. It's a simple calculation. But if there is the opportunity for you to make an upfront investment in order to reduce your long-term spend, that may be a great option for you. So we'll close with this. It's important for you, whether you're out of debt, whether you're well on your journey of savings, or you're just starting out. This is one of the most powerful ways to catapult yourself forward. Build a lifestyle where you scrutinize your spend based on this understanding that a dollar saved is far more powerful and valuable than a dollar earned. Look, the goal is, at least for me, and I think we could all agree, the goal is for us not to be shackled to a job well into our elderly years, to not have to be working extended hours and missing out in raising our families. For those of us that have young kids, especially, how much time are we giving up because we're shackled in a bad financial situation and we end up having to work longer hours? And think of what you're really giving up there. And, whether that's you with young kids or even if you're a single person, how much more could you be experiencing out of life, but you're instead giving it to a corporation that has zero loyalty to you, that really, unfortunately, will cut ties with you at the drop of the hat and at the simple request of some random board of directors sitting in a boardroom somewhere. That's just the reality we live in. Be true to yourself. Be true to what God is calling us to do, to be fiduciary, responsible, and good stewards of what God has given you. And again, the point today is the best way for you to do that is to reduce the amount of money you're spending and be smart with what God has given you. That's all for today. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Take some time, brainstorm some ideas, put it into action, and get the ball rolling into your financial future. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.